The Zorath Empire's rule was absolute. From the towering spires of their capital, Drakkar Prime, to the dust-choked mines on Earth, they controlled everything with an iron fist. Humanity, once proud and fierce, had become little more than a tool for the Zorath's insatiable hunger for conquest. But beneath the boot of oppression, a fire still smoldered. Ilara Grayson, a former military strategist, watched the smoke of yet another burnt-out resistance camp curl into the cold night. Air. She had lost friends, comrades, family over the past year. But one thing had become abundantly clear to her. The Zorath had underestimated humanity. Her fingers traced the scar on her arm, a reminder of a night when the Resistance tried to sabotage a Zorath refinery. They failed, but not without cost. They'd destroyed half the refinery before the Zorath retaliated. The ensuing destruction of their home world's infrastructure had turned Earth into a barren wasteland. "Captain Grayson," a voice called from behind her. She turned to find Jace Calloway, the youngest member of her team, standing in the doorway of their hidden command center, a rusty, abandoned freighter they had hijacked from the Zorath's wreckage. His face was gaunt from the strain of months on the run, but his eyes burned with determination. "We've got intel on their next move," Jace said, holding up a data pad. "They're building something big." Ilara stepped forward, taking the pad. She scanned the data, her mind quickly processing the information. "What is it?" she muttered under her breath. She knew it was something dangerous. She could feel it in her gut. "They're developing a new weapon," Jace replied. "A planet killer, something capable of wiping out entire colonies in one strike." A chill ran through Ilara's spine. Earth wasn't the only planet under their control. There were dozens, each one being exploited for resources, each one inching closer to destruction. If the Zorath were building a weapon like this, the galaxy would soon be plunged into war. Ilara's fists clenched. She had no choice but to act, again. But this time, she wasn't going to play by their rules. She would strike first. "Gather the team," she said, her voice cold and commanding. "We need to find out everything about this weapon, and we need to destroy it before it's too late." Back at the heart of the Resistance's operations, Ilara's team assembled. There was Sergeant Olivia Shaw, a brilliant tactician with a sharp mind and an even sharper tongue. Then there was Lieutenant Kai Duran, once a Zorath engineer who had defected to humanity's side after his family was slaughtered by the Empire. The team had lost members along the way, but the core group was tight-knit and deadly. "Here's what we know," Ilara said, spreading the data across a table. "The Zorath are building a planet killer. It's still in the early stages, but they're advancing faster than we thought. If we don't stop it, we'll lose more than just Earth." "The question is," Olivia interjected, "how do we even get close to something like that? The Zorath's defenses are tighter than ever. Any move we make risks triggering a full-scale retaliation." "We'll need to play their game," Ilara replied, looking at her team. "The Zorath think they've already won. They think we're weak. We'll make them think we're still just a bunch of scattered cells, and then we'll hit them where it hurts." Kai's eyes narrowed. "You want us to infiltrate their top-level command?" "Exactly," Ilara said. "We'll infiltrate their research facility, gather intelligence, and sabotage whatever we can. The weapon has to be destroyed from within." "What about the rest of the galaxy?" Jace asked. "The other colonies? The Zorath have already taken them. If we fail, it'll be too late." "We're not failing," Ilara said firmly. "We can't afford to. We'll make them regret ever thinking humanity was expendable." Later that night, Ilara stood on the bridge of their freighter, staring out at the dark expanse of space. A million thoughts raced through her mind. She had led countless missions, but this one felt different. They were going into the heart of the Empire itself, a place where no resistance fighter had ever survived. But she wasn't about to let fear take hold. The Zorath Empire had made a fatal mistake. They had underestimated humanity. They thought the fire in the hearts of those They conquered had burned out, but it hadn't. It was just waiting to ignite. "Captain?" Olivia's voice broke into her thoughts. "The crew's ready." Ilara nodded. "Let's make history." With the engines roaring to life, the small resistance ship shot into the void, leaving Earth behind. They were heading straight into enemy territory, but Ilara was more certain than ever. This was humanity's time to strike back. The Zorath had no idea what they were about to unleash. The stage was set. The fight for the galaxy's future had just begun. The Zorath Empire was vast, its reach stretching across hundreds of star systems. Their military might was unmatched, and their technology was centuries ahead of anything humanity had ever known. But despite this overwhelming force, Ilara Grayson was beginning to believe that the true weapon in this war wasn't technology or firepower. It was something far simpler. It was humanity itself. As their freighter cruised through the void, Ilara gathered her team in the cramped briefing room, the weight of their mission pressing heavily on her shoulders. They had infiltrated Zorath space before, but this was different. This time, they were not just running guerrilla raids or stealing data, they were going after the heart of the Zorath's empire, the facility where the planet killer was being developed. If they failed, they risked provoking an all-out war. But if they succeeded, they could cripple the Zorath's ability to conquer the galaxy. "We're going to need a plan," Olivia Shaw said, as she leaned over the data screen showing a detailed layout of the Zorath research facility. Her voice was steady, but Ilara could hear the hint of worry. It wasn't just the mission. The Zorath had made it personal. They had killed too many of their allies, destroyed too many of their bases. Ilara's gaze hardened as she looked at the map. The facility was located on Ternak, a planet deep in the heart of the Zorath Empire. Guarded by a battalion of elite soldiers, surrounded by a web of advanced security, it seemed nearly impossible to breach. But Ilara knew something the Zorath didn't. Humans didn't give up. Not when their backs were against the wall. "We've been up against impossible odds before," Ilara said, her voice calm but full of conviction. "And we've always found a way." Jace, Calloway, his dark eyes glinting with that familiar fire, stepped forward. "We can't rely on brute force, though. The Zorath will expect that. We need to outthink them. This isn't a straightforward assault. It's a game of chess." "That's what I'm counting on," Ilara replied. "We'll use their overconfidence against them. They think they can predict us because they've been able to do it with every other species they've conquered. They believe we're too predictable, too reactive. They think we're weak. But we're not." Kai Duran, the Zorath defector, added, his voice a quiet but firm reminder of the truth. "We are anything but weak. We're resilient. We adapt. They never saw that coming." Olivia tapped a series of commands into the screen, and the map of the Zorath base zoomed in, showing the outer defenses, layers of energy shields, automated turrets, and high-tech surveillance systems. But there was a weak point. The Zorath's arrogance had left it exposed. A single, unnoticed entry point deep within the facility's lower levels. "We hit this blind spot. We infiltrate from below, get in, and take out the main power source before they even know we're there," Ilara said, her plan forming. "We disable their communications, isolate the facility, and strike fast and hard." There was a murmur of agreement, but the weight of the task was clear in their eyes. This wasn't just another raid. This was their most dangerous mission yet. The freighter dropped out of hyperspace as they neared Ternak, its surface a bleak, barren world, surrounded by a fierce, swirling cloud of electromagnetic radiation. The atmosphere was barely breathable, and the planet's capital was a sprawling industrial complex, perfect for the Zorath's cold, methodical way of controlling everything. The team geared up in silence, preparing for what would be the most critical strike they had ever made. They were about to penetrate enemy territory in a way they never had before, and Ilara could feel the tension tightening her chest. She couldn't afford to show doubt. Her team needed to believe, needed to trust her. They had to make the impossible possible. Once inside, the plan was simple. They'd breach the underground facility, eliminate any resistance, and plant explosives at the power core. Everything depended on the timing. Any delay, and the Zorath would launch their defenses. "I'm going to set the charges," Kai said, his voice steady. "Once they go off, we'll have 10 minutes before their backup systems kick in. We need to be out of there before then." "Jace, Olivia, you're with me," Elara said, locking eyes with each of them. "We'll handle the first phase of the infiltration, get to the control center, and shut down their systems. Kai, you've got the explosives. Move quickly." They nodded in unison, their faces set with grim determination. There was no turning back now. The fate of countless lives rested on their shoulders. The cold of Turnak's night wrapped around them as they moved through the darkened tunnels beneath the Zorath base. Every step felt like a countdown. The hum of the facility's power systems echoed around them, a constant reminder that they were deep inside enemy territory. Suddenly, Ilara's calm buzzed in her ear. "We've got a problem," Olivia's voice crackled through. "Movement up ahead. Zorath patrol, 3 of them." Ilara held up a hand, signaling for the team to stop. The air seemed to freeze around them as they crouched in the shadows. The patrol was close, too close. They would have to move fast or their cover would be blown. "Plan B," Ilara muttered. "Jace, take the lead. You know what to do." Jace's lips curled into a smile. "This is what I live for." In a blur of motion, Jace sprang forward, his movements quick and precise. The Zorath never saw it coming. In seconds, 2 were down. The third stunned into unconsciousness before he even had a chance to call for backup. Ilara exhaled slowly, her heart pounding, but she couldn't afford to linger. "Let's move." The mission had begun, and there was no turning back. Every step they took was one closer to the heart of the Zorath Empire, where the fate of the galaxy and humanity itself would be decided. The corridors of the Zorath research facility stretched endlessly before Ilara and her team, their footsteps echoing in the silence of the complex. Each turn they made, each shadow they passed, heightened the tension. They were deep inside enemy territory, a single misstep away from triggering an alarm that could bring the full might of the Zorath down on them. But there was no turning back now. "All clear," Jace whispered into his comms, his voice calm despite the heart-pounding situation. "We're almost there." They had successfully navigated the first level of security, neutralizing the patrols without, alerting the base. It was a small victory, but a crucial one. Every successful step brought them closer to the planet killer, the weapon that had to be destroyed before it could be used to wipe out entire colonies. But as Ilara led her team deeper into the heart of the facility, she knew they were running out of time. Olivia checked her wristcom device, a look of concern crossing her face. "We're down to 40 minutes before the Zorath realize we've bypassed their outer security. That's how long we've got to plant the charges and get out." "Then we make it count," Ilara replied, her tone sharp. "Kai, you're up. Find the power core and get those explosives in place." "On it," Kai answered, his voice steady as he moved ahead, a silent shadow slipping through the darkened hallways. His ability to blend into the surroundings made him an invaluable asset, and now more than ever, Ilara relied on his skill. "Jace, Olivia, and I will handle the control center. We'll need to disable their communications, cut off their reinforcements," Ilara continued, her mind already calculating the steps ahead. She could feel the weight of the mission pressing down on her shoulders, but she was resolute. This was their moment. The Zorath had underestimated them, and she intended to prove that mistake was going to cost them everything. As the team split up, Ilara couldn't shake the nagging sense of urgency that clawed at her. The Zorath Empire had crushed entire civilizations without hesitation. Humanity was nothing more than a thorn in their side, a nuisance they would eventually snuff out. But they had miscalculated. They had never expected humanity's will to fight, its unyielding drive to survive. Kai reached the power core after what felt like an eternity. The massive reactor hummed with barely contained energy, its shimmering core a constant reminder of how close they were to unleashing chaos. He moved quickly, placing the explosives with surgical precision. It wasn't just about setting a timer. If they wanted to cripple the Zorath's weapon, the charges had to be positioned perfectly. His fingers flew over the control panel, configuring the settings to detonate at the exact moment they needed. The countdown had already begun in his mind. Charges set, he muttered to himself, but the real danger was just ahead. The Zorath weren't blind. They would soon realize the breach. Meanwhile, Ilara, Jace, and Olivia were closing in on the control center. It was heavily guarded. Ilara had expected nothing less. They paused at the corner, listening carefully. The low hum of machinery and the occasional voice of a Zorath officer echoed through the walls, but the center itself was a fortress, guarded, by elite soldiers who would not hesitate to kill anyone who tried to get inside. Ilara looked at Jace, who was already preparing a series of explosive charges to breach the door. He gave her a quick nod. "On my mark." The blast shook the corridor as the door exploded inward, sending a spray of debris and sparks flying. The guards inside were caught off guard, momentarily disoriented by the force of the explosion. Ilara and her team wasted no time. Jace was already moving in, his blaster in hand, taking down the nearest guard with precision. Olivia followed, cutting down the other soldiers with cold efficiency. In the chaos, Ilara sprinted for the central console. With a few quick keystrokes, she accessed the Zorath communications network. "We're in," she said, her voice tight. "They won't be able to send reinforcements now." But just as she was about to initiate the lockdown sequence, a blaring alarm erupted throughout the base, accompanied by a voice announcing in Zorath, "Breach detected. All security personnel report immediately to Control Center." "Damn it," Ilara hissed. "They've found us." Jace shot her a look, already moving to block the entrance. "We need to finish this now." Olivia gritted her teeth. "We've got 15 minutes. We need to get out of here with our lives, and this facility needs to burn." With the communications offline and the mainframe locked down, they had one final task: the power core. Kai's explosives were ready, but getting back to him was going to be their biggest challenge yet. The Zorath were already mobilizing their forces, and the path back to the lower levels was swarming with soldiers. "We can't go back the way we came," Ilara said, her mind racing. "We'll take the maintenance tunnels. We'll be out of their sight." Olivia nodded, already heading for the exit. "Let's move." The maintenance tunnels were dark and cramped, but they provided a much-needed reprieve from the chaos above. Ilara's heart pounded in her chest as they made their way deeper into the bowels of the facility. The sound of Zorath patrols grew louder, their search intensifying. But they had no choice. Kai was waiting for them, and if they didn't get to him in time, the mission would be a failure. Finally, they reached the power core. Kai was already waiting, his face set in grim determination. He nodded as they approached, the countdown ticking down in his mind. 10 minutes, Kai said, a slight edge of urgency in his voice. "We need to leave now." Ilara didn't hesitate. "Let's make sure they remember us." The charges detonated with a deafening roar, the ground shaking as the power core exploded into a brilliant cascade of light. The entire facility trembled as the Zorath weapon began to crumble. It was the first victory in a war they had no intention of losing. The explosion rocked the Zorath facility, sending a shockwave through the corridors that rattled the very foundation of the structure. The power core had been destroyed, and with it, the hope of completing their planet-killer weapon. For a moment, Ilara stood frozen, her breath coming in ragged gasps as the magnitude of their success sank in. But there was no time to savor the victory. "Move now!" Ilara shouted, snapping her team out of their momentary daze. The countdown was ticking, and every second they spent lingering in the wake of the explosion brought them closer to being caught. The facility was on full alert, and the Zorath would be sending everything they had after them. The team scrambled into motion, sprinting through the narrow maintenance tunnels, dodging the remnants of the blast that had now set off a chain reaction throughout the facility. The walls trembled beneath their feet as the Zorath research station began to crumble, its power grid failing in the wake of the destruction. Kai, still carrying the weight of their explosives, moved with grim determination, his face painted with sweat and dust. "We've got a few minutes before they realize how bad it is," he called out over the comms, his voice steady but tight. "If we're not out by then, we're dead." Ilara nodded, pushing her legs harder. Her mind raced through the possible escape. Routes. They'd entered through a hidden maintenance shaft, but their exit route was too exposed now. The Zorath would be waiting for them at every turn, and the narrow tunnels would give them no place to hide. "We need to get to the surface," she said. "Head toward the upper exits. Stay sharp. This place is about to turn into a war zone." They rounded a corner, and for a moment, the hum of distant alarms and the sound of falling debris was the only noise. Then a sudden burst of blaster fire ripped through the air, narrowly missing Olivia, who dove to the side, her quick reflexes saving her from being hit. "Ambush!" she shouted, rolling behind a bulkhead for cover. The Zorath had arrived. Ilara pulled out her own blaster, firing in quick succession at the shadows now moving toward them. A Zorath soldier dropped to the ground, but more were coming. Ilara's heart raced. There were too many of them, and they were closing in fast. "We can't fight them all," Jace said, his voice tinged with panic. "We need to keep moving." "Jace is right," Ilara said, her voice sharp and focused. "We don't stop until we're out of here." They had no choice. Fights like these were what they had been trained for, but a battle in a confined space with limited cover wasn't one they could afford to win. The Zorath would overwhelm them if they lingered. "Fall back!" Ilara ordered, leading the retreat, toward a less guarded side passage. They had no choice but to move swiftly and decisively, always staying one step ahead of the relentless enemy pursuit. The tunnels twisted and turned, the distant sound of blaster fire and explosions echoing in their wake. The team's breathing was heavy, and Ilara could feel the weight of exhaustion settling in. But there was no time to rest. Every minute spent in the Zorath facility was a minute they risked not surviving. Jace was the first to reach the surface, his face grim as he scanned the area. "It's clear for now, but we've got company on the way." Ilara emerged next, her eyes darting around the desolate landscape of Turnak. The facility loomed behind them, smoke and fire rising from the wreckage of what had once been a bastion of the Zorath's might. But that didn't mean they were safe. Turnak's surface was crawling with Zorath military forces, and their chances of escape depended on getting to the rendezvous point. "Where's Kai?" Ilara demanded, scanning the perimeter. Kai emerged from the shadows a moment later, his face hard with determination. "I'm here. We need to move quickly. The Zorath will be regrouping soon." "Then let's move," Ilara said, setting a swift pace toward the rendezvous point. They had to reach the extraction zone, a secluded valley far from the main military routes. It was the only place where their small freighter could land undetected. If they didn't get there in time, they'd be caught in the open with no way to escape. The trek was grueling. The landscape of Turnak was harsh, barren plains stretching, under a dark sky filled with swirling electromagnetic storms. Every step felt like an eternity. The air was thick with dust, and the ground was littered with jagged rocks that made it difficult to move quickly. But Ilara's team didn't stop. They couldn't. "I see the ship," Jace called out, pointing toward the distant silhouette of their freighter nestled in the valley. "Almost there!" Olivia shouted, pushing herself harder. The Zorath were closing in. Ilara could hear the sounds of transport ships overhead, the unmistakable hum of their engines cutting through the wind. Time was running out. As they reached the valley, the freighter's engines roared to life, the ship hovering just above the ground, ready for takeoff. "Get in!" Ilara shouted. "Now!" Each member of the team scrambled aboard, climbing the narrow entry ramp into the safety of the ship. The Zorath were almost on top of them. "Lift off!" Ilara ordered as she watched the sky fill with enemy fire. They were out of time. The freighter's engines kicked in with a deafening roar, lifting them off the ground and into the dark expanse of space. Ilara looked out the viewports as Turnak's surface shrank below them, the Zorath's attempts to pursue nothing more than futile gestures against the freedom they had just won. But as the stars stretched out before them, Ilara's mind remained, focused on the mission. They had struck a significant blow to the Zorath Empire. But they weren't done. The war was far from over, and the Zorath wouldn't stop until they had wiped humanity from the galaxy. "Get some rest," she said quietly, to her team. "We're not finished yet. The real fight had only just begun." The crew of the Endurance sat in the quiet aftermath of their escape from Turnak. The stars outside seemed distant, indifferent to the world-shattering events that had unfolded on the barren planet below. They had succeeded. The Zorath planet killer. Weapon was destroyed, and with it, a significant blow had been dealt to the Empire. But as the adrenaline faded, a heavy silence descended upon the ship. Ilara Grayson sat at the command table, her fingers lightly tracing the surface of a data pad that still held the schematics of the Zorath facility. Despite the victory, her mind wouldn't stop racing. The mission had been a success, but it had also cost them. There were cracks beginning to show. The Zorath were not an enemy to be trifled with. They would retaliate, and they would do so with a force unlike anything humanity had ever seen. She looked up to find Jace Calloway standing at the doorway, his eyes dark with the same thought. "What's next, Ilara?" She exhaled, rubbing her temples. "We wait, and we prepare. The Zorath won't let this go. They'll come for us," Jace said, his voice low. "And this time it won't just be their weapons. We've hit them where it hurts, Ilara. They'll bring everything they've got." Ilara nodded, meeting his gaze. "I know. That's why we need to act quickly. They'll strike back soon, too soon. We need to hit them harder before they can recover." A soft chime from her console interrupted the moment, and she straightened in her seat. It was a message, a priority transmission from Earth. Her fingers tapped the screen to open it. The image that appeared was that of a high-ranking officer, General Blake, the head of the Earth Defense Council. His face was stern, a grim set to his jaw. "Ilara, I don't need to tell you what you've just done," he began, his tone clipped. "Destroying the Zorath weapon was a victory, yes, but you've also put Earth and the entire human race on their radar. The Zorath won't forget this, and they'll be coming for us. We've already detected several enemy fleets entering Earth's sector." Her stomach twisted. She had expected this, but hearing the confirmation from the highest levels of command made the weight of the situation much more real. "We're preparing our defenses," General Blake continued, "but we'll need your team's expertise. You've proven you can infiltrate and strike at their heart. We need you to lead a series of covert operations within Zorath space, disrupting their infrastructure. Anything you can do to slow their advance on Earth, we'll take." Ilara didn't hesitate. "We'll be ready, General, but we need more than just orders. We need intel, and we need to know the Zorath's next move." Blake's eyes narrowed, his tone softening. "We're working on it. We'll send everything we have to you. You've already done the impossible once. Don't stop now." The transmission cut off, and the screen went black. Ilara leaned back in her chair, letting the silence settle over her. The weight of what was coming pressed heavily on her. Humanity was now at war with the most advanced empire in the galaxy. If they didn't act swiftly, Earth would be lost. We've stirred a hornet's nest, Jace said quietly, taking a seat across from her. And they're going to send their entire swarm after us. Ilara glanced at him, her mind already working through their next steps. Then we hit them first. For the next few days, the crew of the Endurance worked tirelessly. The freighter had been modified over the course of their journey, now serving as a mobile command center. Ilara spent hours poring over the latest intelligence they had received, every bit of data about the Zorath's movements and strategy. The Zorath had regrouped quickly after the destruction of the weapon, and now their fleets were advancing, with renewed purpose. Their eyes were on Earth, and on the remnants of humanity that had dared to defy them. Olivia Shaw worked with Kai Duran in the engineering bay, helping to fine-tune the ship's weapons systems. They had to be ready for anything, and with the Zorath closing in, their best chance was to strike fast and hard before the enemy could overwhelm them. "We've got some new tech coming online," Olivia reported as she walked into the command room, wiping her hands on a rag. "Better targeting systems, cloaking upgrades. We'll be able to hit harder and get out quicker." "Good," Ilara said, looking up from the screen displaying Zorath fleet movements. "We'll need every advantage we can get." Kai entered shortly after, his usual calm demeanor giving way to a rare flicker of frustration. "The Zorath's new fleet is faster than we anticipated. They're adapting. We can't outgun them. We'll have to outsmart them." "Agreed," Ilara said, turning to him. "We're not going to engage them head-on. We need to draw them into a trap, take out their communications and command ships. If we can cripple their coordination, we stand a chance." Jace, who had been quiet until then, leaned forward, his gaze intense. "We need to make them believe we're smaller than we really are. Draw them into one of the old mining sectors in the asteroid belt. They won't expect us to set up shop there." Ilara looked around the table at her team. Their resolve was unwavering. They were in this together, and despite the impossible odds, she knew they could do it. The Zorath might be an unstoppable force, but humanity had one thing they didn't: the ability to adapt, to improvise, and to fight when the situation seemed hopeless. "Set course for the asteroid belt," Ilara ordered. "Let's make sure the Zorath know that humanity doesn't kneel. We're not done yet." As the Endurance surged forward, cutting through the vast expanse of space, Ilara felt the weight of the upcoming battle settle in. The war was far from over, but humanity had already made its mark. The Zorath were coming for them. But they would soon realize that no empire, no matter how vast, could crush the human spirit. And if the Zorath wanted to win, they would have to fight like never before. The Endurance drifted silently through the shadowed expanse of the asteroid belt, the flickering lights of distant stars offering the only illumination in the endless dark. The ship was nearly invisible among the dense cluster of asteroids, its cloaking systems making it almost undetectable to the Zorath's advanced sensors. Ilara had chosen this location for one reason. It was a graveyard of forgotten ships, an ideal place to set a trap. For the past few days, the crew had been working relentlessly, preparing to lure the Zorath into the belt and cripple their fleet before they could strike Earth. It was a risky plan, but it was their best shot at surviving. Every detail had been meticulously calculated, every angle covered. "All systems are go," Olivia said, her fingers flying over the controls in the ship's cockpit. "We've set up our decoys. The Zorath should think we're just a lone freighter. Drifting through the belt, easy prey." Jace, who had been monitoring the long-range scans, turned to face Ilara. "We've detected their fleet movements. They're closing in on our position. They're expecting us to make a run for it. We'll have to stay perfectly still until they're within range." Ilara nodded, her expression hardening. "Patience. Wait for the signal. Once they're in range, we strike." The minutes stretched on, each one feeling like an eternity. Every time a Zorath ship appeared on the sensors, Ilara's pulse quickened, but she kept her focus. The plan was simple: make the Zorath believed they were easy prey, vulnerable and alone. Then, at the perfect moment, they would unleash hell. The Zorath fleet, a massive armada of battle cruisers and dreadnoughts, continued to move toward them unaware of the trap. Their ships were sleek, formidable, their weapons capable of annihilating entire fleets. But they were about to walk right into a firestorm. Alara stood at the command center, her hand clenched into a fist at her side. Remember, we're not going to fight head-on. We disable their command ship first. Once their coordination is broken, the rest will fall apart. The crew was ready, each of them positioned in their respective stations, waiting for Alara's command. "Here they come," Jace said, his voice tight with anticipation. His eyes were glued to the sensor array, tracking the lead Zorath ship as it drew closer. "They'll be in range in 3 minutes." Olivia's voice came over the comms, her tone laced with focus. "We've got their main ship, the Zarathul, right on our tail. If we don't hit them now, we're dead." "Wait for it," Alara instructed. "Once the Zarathul and the support ships pass, we'll hit them from both sides." A tense silence fell over the crew as they watched the enemy fleet approach, their enormous ships slowly gliding toward the trap. The seconds ticked away with agonizing slowness. Then, without warning, the moment arrived. "Now!" Alara barked, and the Endurance sprang to life. Olivia slammed the controls forward, launching the ship out of its hiding spot behind a massive asteroid. Simultaneously, Jace and Kai activated the decoys, hundreds of small drones that deployed around them, each emitting false signals that mimicked the Endurance's energy signature. The Zorath were caught off guard. The decoys filled the sensor, screens scrambling their readings. The Zarathul and its accompanying ships turned to face the swarm, diverting their attention to the incoming decoys. But Alara had planned for this. While the Zorath focused on the false targets, the Endurance shot out from its cover, targeting the heart of the fleet, full power to forward guns. Alara commanded, gripping the armrests of her seat as the ship's weapons hummed to life. Jace aimed and fired, a devastating shot streaking toward the Zarathul. The first blast hit its shields, weakening them, but not enough. They needed more. "Kai!" Alara shouted. "Prepare for boarding." Kai, already suited in his combat armor, nodded and moved to the airlock. "I'm ready. Just give the word." Jace fired again, and this time, the Zarathul's shields flickered and failed, leaving it exposed. Alara gritted her teeth. "Now, Kai! Get to their bridge!" The airlock hissed open, and Kai sprinted out, his boots thumping on the hull of the ship. His target was clear, the command bridge of the Zarathul. He would infiltrate, disable their systems, and disrupt the enemy's ability to coordinate. It was the critical strike they needed. Back on the Endurance, the crew kept up the pressure. With the Zorath focused on the decoys, they had no idea the Endurance had closed the distance. Alara watched the Zarathul's command ship on the main display, watching for any sign of Kai's success. Suddenly, the Zarathul's engines flickered. "Direct hit!" Olivia called out. "We've breached their power core!" The ship rocked violently as a secondary explosion rippled through the enemy vessel. The Zarathul was struggling, and now it was only a matter of time. The remaining Zorath ships began to realize something was wrong, but it was too late. The decoys had done their job. They were disoriented and unable to mount an effective defense. Without their command ship, their coordination had crumbled. Alara's voice was steady but filled with fire. "Take down the smaller ships. We cripple them now, or we'll be fighting this war forever." Kai had made it to the command bridge, swiftly, cutting down Zorath soldiers in his path. The bridge was chaos as Zorath officers scrambled to regain control. He moved fast, using the ship's own systems to send a pulse through their command center, effectively shutting down their weapons and communications. The Zarathul was now nothing more than a sitting target. "Mission complete," Kai reported over the comms, his voice steady even as alarms blared in the background. "The Zarathul is neutralized," Ilara allowed herself a small, grim smile. Well done, Kai. Now let's finish this. With the command ship disabled and its fleet in disarray, the Endurance and its crew moved in for the kill. The Zorath ships, now without direction, were easy pickings. The remaining ships fell like dominoes, their shields and weapons no match for the superior tactics and precision strikes of the human crew. Within moments, the once feared Zorath armada was reduced to a scattered mess of debris. As the final Zorath ship exploded in a brilliant flash of light, Ilara stood at the command center, staring out into the void. They had done it. They had struck a crushing blow to the heart of the Zorath fleet. But the war was far from over. We've won today, she said quietly, but the fight is far from finished. We're only getting started. The crew of the Endurance stood with her, knowing full well that this victory was just the beginning of humanity's fight for survival. The Endurance was silent in the aftermath of their victory. The Zorath armada had been shattered, their command vessel crippled beyond repair. But even in this moment of triumph, the crew knew it was only temporary. The Zorath Empire had many fleets, and this was only a single battle in the war for survival. The human spirit had proven itself once more, but they were far from safe. Ilara Grayson stood in the command center, staring at the swirling stars outside. The Endurance had left, the remnants of the Zorath fleet behind, their wreckage drifting through the void. For now, the enemy was in disarray, but that wouldn't last long. "Status report, Jace," she said, breaking the silence. Jace Calloway glanced at the sensor array, his brow furrowing as he read the latest data. "They're regrouping," he said, his voice low. "It won't be long before they send reinforcements. We've bought ourselves some time, but not much." "We knew this wouldn't be easy," Ilara replied, her voice steady but tinged with the weight of the situation. "We can't afford to sit idle." "We've got options," Jace continued, pulling up a map of nearby star systems. "There are a few places where we can lay low for a while, maybe even strike at some Zorath supply lines. But the longer we wait, the stronger they'll become. We need to plan our next move carefully." Ilara nodded. The Zorath would come for them with all their might. The Empire had vast resources and unrelenting ambition. No victory could change that. "We need to make a decision," she said, turning to face the rest of the crew. "Olivia, what's the status on our ship's systems?" Olivia Shaw, the ship's lead engineer, leaned over her console. "The ship's ready for more action," she said. "We've got our weapons, engines, and cloaking systems online. I've also made some upgrades to our defenses. But we'll need a full overhaul if we plan to stay out here too long." "Can we keep up the pace?" Ilara pressed. Olivia looked at her expression serious. "We can, but not indefinitely. We'll need to resupply if we plan to keep fighting." Ilara's eyes narrowed as she thought. The Zorath were recovering fast, and they had made it clear they wouldn't stop until humanity was wiped out. Their fleet was rebuilding, and Earth's defenses, despite the best efforts of the Earth Defense Council, were still vulnerable. "We need to get to Earth," she said, making a decision. "The Zorath will come for us, and we're not going to outrun them forever. It's time to take the fight to their home. We strike at the heart of their empire." Jace's eyes widened slightly. "Are you suggesting we go into Zorath space? The Empire's capital?" Ilara nodded, her expression resolute. "It's the only way we can truly cripple them. We've already dealt a significant blow, but the Zorath won't be stopped by a single defeat. We need to take out their central command, their leadership. If we can do that, we cripple the entire Empire." Kai Duran, the crew's elite infiltrator, spoke up from the back of the room. "It's a suicide mission, Ilara. We'll be walking into the most heavily guarded area in the galaxy. Getting to their capital will be nearly impossible." Ilara met his gaze, her eyes fierce with determination. "I know the risks, Kai, But it's the only chance we have. If we wait any longer, Earth will fall. The Zorath will come, and we'll have nothing left to fight for. This is our chance to take the war to them." Jace exhaled slowly. "You're right. We don't have time to hesitate, but we'll need more than just a few ships to take down the heart of the Zorath Empire." Ilara turned back to the navigation panel and brought up a map of the Zorath's core territories. "I know. We need allies. The Zorath Empire has enemies. We've heard whispers of rebellions and resistance movements in their conquered sectors. If we can find them, we can unite them. We can strike together." Olivia's voice cut through the tension. "But where do we even start looking? Zorath space is massive. We'd be like needles in a haystack." Ilara's fingers tapped the console thoughtfully. "We start with the Zorath's weak points, those areas that have been destabilized by our attacks. We make contact with the resistance cells, convince them to fight with us. It won't be easy, but if we can rally enough support, we'll have a fighting chance." She paused, looking each of them in the eyes. "This isn't just about us anymore. It's about Earth's future, the future of every human being still alive. We can't back down." The crew exchanged glances, the weight of her words sinking in. They were all in this together. And despite the risks, they knew Ilara was right. Jace took a deep breath. "All right, we'll need to move quickly. Every moment we waste is another moment the Zorath are getting stronger." Ilara nodded. "Then let's make it count. Set a course for the nearest resistance cell. We're going to find them, and we're going to bring them into this fight." The ship's engines hummed to life as the crew prepared for the next phase of their mission. There was no turning back now. The Zorath Empire might have thought they were invincible, but humanity had something they didn't: the will to fight, to survive, and to win. And that was something the Zorath couldn't destroy. The Endurance leapt into hyperspace, leaving the shattered remnants of the Zorath fleet far behind. Ahead lay the heart of enemy territory, and the fate of Earth, and perhaps the entire galaxy, hung in the balance. The crew of the Endurance had one goal now: strike the heart of the Zorath Empire and bring down the tyrants who threatened to destroy everything they loved. The storm was coming, but humanity had never been afraid of the storm. The Endurance sailed through the black void of space, the hum of its engines the only sound that broke the silence in the command center. Ilara Grayson stood at the helm, eyes fixed on the stars ahead, each one a potential beacon of resistance or peril. The crew had united behind her, and now they were preparing to launch the final phase of their mission, an assault on the heart of the Zorath Empire. The time for hesitation had passed. Humanity was at war, and Earth's survival depended on the choices they made in the next few hours. If they failed now, there would be no second chance. Approaching the Zorath border, Jace Calloway reported, his voice steady, though a hint of tension was palpable. "We've detected heavy patrols. They're expecting us." Ilara turned to face him, her expression calm, but filled with determination. "We'll have to be quick and decisive. No time for a long engagement. Olivia, how are our systems?" Olivia Shaw, the ship's lead engineer, was already monitoring the ship's status. "Weapons are fully charged. Cloaking systems are operational, and we've updated our escape protocols. If we're detected, we can get out fast." "Good," Ilara said, nodding in approval. "Let's make sure we stay one step ahead of them. Kai, get ready to board any ships we disable. We're going to need all the intel we can get once we make our move." Kai Duran, the ship's infiltrator and special ops expert, gave her a sharp nod. "I'm ready. I'll hit their command posts the moment we breach their outer defenses." "Perfect," Ilara replied, her gaze scanning the faces of her crew. "This is it. We strike fast, hard, and with everything we've got. Earth's future is in our hands." The Zorath capital was a fortress, a sprawling network of ships, stations, and orbital defenses that encircled their homeworld like an impenetrable wall. The planet below was a world of towering cities and vast military complexes where the Zorath elite resided, their power absolute. It was here in the heart of their empire that Alara intended to finish what they had started. As the Endurance approached the outskirts of the Zorath stronghold, the crew fell into a grim focus. The enemy patrols were closer now, their ships moving in tight formation, patrolling their territory with deadly precision. "We'll need to slip through undetected," Jace said, his eyes narrowed. "If we're caught, we'll be overwhelmed." Alara nodded. "Activate cloaking. We'll drift along the outer edge of their perimeter until we can find a weak point in their defense grid." The ship's cloaking systems activated with a soft hiss, and the Endurance melted into the darkness, invisible to the Zorath's sensors. The crew watched the screen as enemy ships passed by, unaware of the danger just beyond their reach. For hours, they navigated the perimeter, waiting for the perfect opening. Finally, the moment arrived. A gap in the Zorath fleet appeared, a slight vulnerability in their otherwise impenetrable formation. It was small, but it was enough. "Now," Alara ordered. "Move in." Olivia fired the engines, and the Endurance shot forward, gliding silently through the gap. The Zorath ships were still oblivious, their sensors unable to detect the Endurance's stealth approach. Within minutes, they were inside the heart of the Zorath defenses. "We're in," Jace said, his voice filled with quiet triumph. "Now we just have to survive long enough to do some damage." Ilara's gaze remained fixed on the screen, her expression unwavering. "We're not here to survive. We're here to win." The Endurance darted through the labyrinth of the Zorath capital's defenses, using every asteroid, moon, and space station as cover. They were now deep within enemy territory, and the Zorath would soon realize their mistake. But the crew was ready. "Prepare for engagement," Alara commanded. "We're going straight for their command center. Kai, make sure the data we need is on those ships." Kai didn't respond verbally, but his movements spoke volumes. He was already gearing up, preparing to infiltrate and disable their systems from within. His objective was clear: strike at the heart of the Zorath's power. As the Endurance drew closer to the heart of the capital, their presence was finally detected. Alarms blared as Zorath ships turned toward them, weapons powering up. "Brace for impact!" Olivia shouted. The first blast rocked the ship, but the Endurance held firm. Ilara's hands flew over the controls, directing the ship with pinpoint precision. They would not be easy prey. "Full power to forward guns," Jace shouted. Alara fired, sending a barrage of energy blasts into the nearest Zorath cruiser. The ship's shields crackled and faltered under the assault. In the midst of the chaos, Alara saw Kai's signal on her console, a confirmation that he was aboard one of the disabled ships, working his way through their systems. "Keep them distracted," Alara ordered, her voice steely. "We need that command. Center disabled." Olivia piloted the ship with exceptional skill, dodging incoming fire and using the Zorath's own ships as shields against their pursuers. With every passing second, the Endurance moved closer to its goal. Kai was deep inside the Zorath command ship now, his mind focused on one thing: completing his mission. The interior of the ship was a maze of corridors, each guarded by heavily armed Zorath soldiers. But Kai was faster, quieter. His combat skills were unmatched, and he knew exactly where to strike. He reached the central command room and planted the disruptor device, an electromagnetic pulse generator capable of disabling the entire fleets. Communications, the Zorath wouldn't be able to coordinate, and their ships would be sitting ducks. "Device deployed," Kai reported over the comms. "Let's finish this." Ilara's voice was resolute. "Kai, get back here, we're hitting the core now." With the command center disabled and the Zorath in disarray, the crew of the Endurance launched their final assault. As their weapons tore into the Zorath ships, they felt the tide turn. For the first time, the Zorath Empire was on the back foot. Zorath fleet, unable to coordinate, began to fall apart. Their massive warships reduced to burning wrecks. In the heart of their capital, their power was broken. The battle raged on, but Ilara knew the war was won. The Zorath Empire had fallen, shattered by humanity's resolve, ingenuity, and the unbreakable spirit that refused to bow to tyranny. "We did it," Jace whispered. Ilara looked out at the stars. "This is just the beginning." The Endurance flew into the heart of the storm, not as conquerors, but as survivors. The war for humanity's future was far from over, but now the universe knew one thing. The human spirit could not be defeated, and it would never, ever give up.